The Cursed Crown, a tale of blood and divinity. In the shadowed heart of the Alban Hills, where the lake of Nemi lay like a dark mirror under gnarled, ancient trees, a sinister ritual unfolded. The grove of Diana Nemorensis, sacred to the goddess of the wild, was no place of peace. Here, a figure known as the King of the Wood prowled, his sword gleaming with a cold, hungry edge, his eyes haunted by the spectre of death. To claim his title, he had to spill the blood of his predecessor, a brutal act sealed by plucking a mysterious branch, whispered to be the Golden Bough, a talisman of life and doom. Two questions hung over this grim sanctuary like storm clouds. Why must the priest-king kill to reign? And why was this cursed branch the key to his fate? The answers lay buried in a world where kings were not just rulers but priests, magicians, and gods, their thrones stained with blood and shadowed by divine wrath. Why was he called the King of the Wood? Why was his office, drenched in murder, revered as a kingdom? To unravel this, we must descend into the twilight of ancient Italy and Greece, where the line between king and priest was as thin as a blade's edge, and the air was thick with the scent of sacrifice. In Rome and the shadowed towns of Latium, a figure called the Sacrificial King stalked the sacred precincts, his queen at his side, her eyes hollow with the weight of their duties. They offered blood and prayers to appease the gods, their hands trembling as they invoked powers that could bless or curse the land. These were no mere priests but echoes of a darker age, when kings held both scepter and altar, their authority a pact with the divine, sealed in blood. Across the wine-dark sea, in Athens, a similar figure cast a long shadow. The second magistrate, known only as the king, wore a crown of dread. With his queen, he presided over rites that stirred the soul and chilled the bone. Picture the city at dusk, torches flickering like restless spirits during the Eleusinian Mysteries, where initiates sought forbidden truths in Demeter's name. The king stood watch over the Lenaean festival, where Dionysus' wild revels unleashed madness in the hills, and he oversaw torch races, their flames dancing like omens in the night. Most eerie of all, he judged trials where animals or objects, a wolf that tore flesh, a stone that crushed bone, faced justice as if possessed by malevolent spirits. Plato called these duties the most solemn and ancestral rites, binding the king to the common hearth, where Hestia's eternal flame burned, a beacon in a world teetering on the edge of the divine and the damned. This dark fusion of royalty and priesthood was no rare curse. In Kos, a king slit the throats of sacrificial beasts for Hestia, claiming their hide and leg as his grim reward, a token of his pact with the goddess. In Mytilene, kings hosted feasts at the common hearth, their tables groaning under offerings to gods who demanded loyalty or vengeance. In Chios, they guarded sacred groves with a zeal that bordered on obsession, ready to curse any shepherd who let his flock defile the holy ground. The penalty for silence was not just divine wrath but a fine that stung like a lash. In the same island, the king's voice carried the weight of doom, pronouncing public curses that could shatter lives, a power the ancients wielded like a blade in the dark. At Delphi, where the oracle's whispers pierced the veil of fate, a king performed a ritual every 8 years that seemed born of nightmare. Seated in a shadowed square, he doled out barley and pulse to a procession of citizens and strangers, their faces gaunt with hunger or fear. Then, an effigy of a girl was brought before him, its wooden eyes lifeless yet accusing. With a single, chilling strike of his shoe, he struck the image, a penance for a tragedy long past. A maiden, humiliated by a king's blow in a time of famine, had hanged herself, her ghost lingering in the ritual's grim reenactment. The president of the Thyiads, wild women devoted to Bacchus's frenzied worship, carried the effigy to a ravine, burying it with a noose around its neck, as if to bind the past's restless spirits. In cities like Megara and Aegosthena, the kingship was a fleeting curse, an annual office where each year was marked by a new name, etched in the annals like a gravestone. At Priene, a young man was chosen as king to slaughter a bull for Poseidon at the Panionian festival, his youth a fleeting shield against the weight of divine duty. Some Greek states bore the burden of multiple kings, their roles entwined with the spiritual pulse of the community. In Rome, legend whispered that the sacrificial king rose from the ashes of the monarchy, tasked with offering the sacrifices once made by true kings, their altars stained with the blood of forgotten reigns. Greece held a similar tale, seeing these priestly kings as shadows of a time when rulers were both sovereigns and conduits to the gods. Sparta, defiant in its monarchy, offered a glimpse into this lost world. Its two kings, believed to be born of Zeus's divine blood, offered every state sacrifice, their prayers rising like smoke to the heavens. One served as priest of Zeus la sea demon, the other of heavenly Zeus, their thrones a bridge between mortal and divine. Even when power slipped from royal hands, as in Ephesus, descendants of the ancient King Codrus clung to the title, draped in purple robes, seated in honor at games, and presiding over Demeter's rites. In Cyrene, the deposed King Battus kept sacred duties, a ghostly remnant of his crown. These tales suggest a prehistoric age when kings ruled as gods, their every act a ritual, their bloodlines are packed with the divine. This dark marriage of royal and priestly power stretched beyond the Mediterranean's shores. In Asia Minor, cities like Zala and Pessinus were ruled by pontiffs whose word was law and whose prayers held the gods' ears, their power a shadow of medieval popes. In ancient Teutonic tribes, kings stood as high priests, their sacrifices a plea for favor in a world of frost and blood. In China, emperors performed rituals from ancient tomes, their offerings a dance with eternity. In Madagascar, the king, as high priest, stood over a bullock sacrifice at the new year, his prayers mingling with the beast's dying breath, seeking blessings for a realm teetering on the edge of chaos. Among the Galas of East Africa, kings climbed mountain peaks to offer sacrifices, sometimes human, their blades gleaming under starlit skies. In the jungles of Central America, the ruins of Palenque whispered of kings who bore both crown and sacred mantle, their altars lost in the green embrace of time. Among the Matabeles, the king, as high priest, prayed to his ancestors' spirits, and his own, at festivals of dance and new fruits, his own soul a vessel of divine power. This belief in the king's divinity was no mere whisper but a thunderous truth. Among the Matabeles, the king's prayers to his own spirit revealed a chilling reality: he was no mere man but a god incarnate, his presence a conduit for blessings that defied mortal limits. In Sparta, this divinity took a spectral form. The historian Herodotus tells of a time when both Spartan kings marched to war, each shadowed by one of the Tyndarids, Castor and Pollux, the heavenly twins, sons of Zeus. Later, when one king stayed behind, so too did one twin, their divine presence a constant shadow. These twins, depicted as spearmen, were linked to stars and eerie lights that flickered on spear tips in stormy skies, seen by Roman sentinels pacing their rounds and Cossack riders galloping across the steppes. At the Battle of Lake Regillus, fought in the dying light of a summer evening, legend spoke of Castor and Pollux charging on white steeds, their spearheads aglow with an otherworldly fire, leading Sparta's warriors to victory. These tales, etched in the memories of villagers, were no mere fables but glimpses of a world where kings walked with gods, their every step a dance on the edge of the divine. In the primal darkness of early societies, kings were more than priests, they were gods, their touch believed to summon rain, coax sun from storm, and make fields bloom with life. To the savage mind, the world was a tapestry of spiritual forces, personal beings swayed by pity, hope, or fear. A king could bend these forces with prayers, promises, or threats, ensuring bountiful harvests and thriving herds. If he himself was a god, as many believed, he needed no higher power, his own will could shape the world's fate. Yet another, darker path to divinity existed: sympathetic magic, a primal art where actions mirror desires, spilling water to call rain, scattering seeds to summon crops. Kings, often master magicians, rose to power through their supposed mastery of these forbidden arts. Their rituals are packed with the unseen. The King of the Wood, with his blood-soaked title and cursed branch, was a relic of this shadowed world, his fate a riddle that demanded a journey into the heart of magic and dread, where the line between man and God was written in blood. The shadow of enchantment, the dark art of sympathetic magic. In the shadowed grove of Nemi, where the lake gleamed like a dark eye beneath twisted, ancient trees, a priest-king known as the King of the Wood paced with a blade that hungered for blood. His title was won through murder, his life bound to a sacred tree, and his fate sealed by the plucking of a mysterious branch, perhaps the Golden Bough, a talisman whispered to hold the power of life and death. Two questions loomed over this cursed sanctuary like a gathering storm: why must he kill to claim his crown? And why was this branch, steeped in legend, the key to his doom? To unravel these mysteries, we must descend into a world where magic was not a mere trick but a force as real as the wind, a primal art woven into the fabric of existence. In this world, the King of the Wood was no mere priest but a magician, his rituals a dance with the unseen, his power rooted in the dark principles of sympathetic magic. In the primal darkness of ancient minds, magic was not a game but a law, a belief that the world could be bent to human will through secret rites. The savage, untouched by the cold logic of science, saw the universe as a tapestry of unseen forces, each thread pulsing with a hidden sympathy. Two great principles governed this shadowy art, as unyielding as the laws of nature yet as deceptive as a mirage. The first was the law of similarity, a belief that like begets like, that an act could mirror its desired effect. The second was the law of contact or contagion, a conviction that things once joined remain bound, their fates entwined acrospert event when parted by vast distances. These were the twin pillars of sympathetic magic, a false science and a cursed art that promised power over the cosmos. The law of similarity, or homeopathic magic, was a spell cast in mimicry. Picture a sorcerer in a firelit cave, his face painted with ash, crafting a clay figure of an enemy. He shapes it with care, making it resemble the foe, then drives a thorn into its heart, believing the act will pierce the living man miles away. The logic was simple yet sinister: what resembles another can become it, the image wielding the power of the real. This was not mere imitation but a dark alchemy, a belief that the act could summon the outcome. A hunter might carve a wooden deer and thrust a spear into it, certain it would ensure a kill in the forest. A healer might pour water over a fevered brow, mimicking rain to cool the body's fire. This was homeopathic magic, a shadowed mirror of cause and effect, where the act was the spell. The law of contact, or contagious magic, was even more chilling. Imagine a shaman clutching a lock of hair, stolen from a sleeping victim. Though the victim is far away, the shaman believes the hair retains a secret bond, an invisible thread that links it to its owner. By burning the hair, he might curse the victim with fever; by burying it, he might bind their soul to the earth. This was the belief that objects once joined, hair, nails, a garment, remained forever connected, their fates intertwined through a mysterious ether. A warrior might fear a discarded blade, believing an enemy could use it to strike him from afar. A mother might guard her child's first tooth, lest it fall into hands that could weave a spell of harm. Contagious magic was a web of unseen ties, a haunting conviction that no distance could sever the bond. These two laws often wove together in a dark tapestry. A sorcerer might craft a wax figure resembling a rival, embedding a nail clipping within it, combining similarity and contact to amplify the curse. Homeopathic magic could stand alone, but contagious magic often leaned on the power of resemblance, the two principles merging in a sinister dance. To the savage mind, these were not mere rituals but universal truths, laws that governed not just human actions but the very workings of nature. The magician did not question these beliefs, did not ponder the logic behind them. Like a man digesting his meal without understanding the process, he acted on instinct, his mind untouched by the abstract. Magic was his art, not his science, a bastard craft born of a spurious understanding of the world. Yet to the philosophic eye, these principles were flawed, misapplications of the mind's tendency to link ideas. Homeopathic magic mistook resemblance for identity, assuming a clay figure was the man himself. Contagious magic erred in believing that a severed lock of hair could still wound its owner. Together, they formed sympathetic magic, a belief in a secret sympathy that bound things across empty space, an invisible force not unlike the ether of modern science, yet rooted in superstition. This was the world of the King of the Wood, a world where a branch plucked from a sacred tree could hold the power of life and death, where a priest-king's rituals could sway the gods or curse the land. Picture the King of the Wood in his grove, his sword glinting in the moonlight, his heart heavy with the knowledge of his inevitable doom. Was his act of plucking the Golden Bough a homeopathic spell, mimicking the severing of his predecessor's life? Did the branch, once part of the sacred tree, carry the contagious power of Diana's divine essence, binding the priest to her will? In this primal world, such beliefs were not mere fancies but truths as solid as stone. The king's rituals, perhaps scattering seeds to ensure a harvest or spilling blood to appease the goddess, were acts of sympathetic magic, his crown a symbol of his power to bend nature's course. Yet this power was a double-edged blade, for the same magic that elevated him marked him for death, his life a sacrifice to the unending cycle of the grove. In distant lands, these dark arts thrived. In the forests of ancient Germany, a shaman might carve a wooden figure of a foe, thrusting pins into its heart to bring death from afar, a homeopathic curse born of similarity. In the villages of Africa, a healer might wrap a patient's garment around a sacred stone, believing the contact would draw out sickness, a contagious spell woven through touch. In the jungles of the Pacific, a warrior might bury an enemy's spear tip, certain it would wound its owner, the bond unbroken by distance. These were not mere superstitions but laws of life, as real to the savage as the wind or the rain. The magician, ignorant of the true workings of the world, saw in every act a potential spell, in every object a hidden power. Consider the tale of a Babylonian sorcerer, his eyes gleaming with malice as he crafted a clay doll in the likeness of a rival king. Under the cover of night, he pierced its chest with a thorn, chanting words of power, believing the act would stop the king's heart miles away. Or imagine an Egyptian healer, her hands trembling as she tied a lock of a child's hair to a sacred amulet, convinced it would protect the child from harm, the hair's connection to its owner a shield against evil. In Greece, a priestess might pour wine over a stone altar, mimicking the flow of divine favor, her homeopathic ritual a plea for the god's mercy. These acts, born of the laws of similarity and contact, were the threads of a dark tapestry, weaving human will into the fabric of the cosmos. The King of the Wood stood at the heart of this shadowed world. His grove was a crucible of magic, where every act carried the weight of divine consequence. Did he pluck the Golden Bough to harness its contagious power, believing it held the spirit of Diana herself? Did he mimic the act of killing in some forgotten rite, his sword a tool of homeopathic magic? The savage mind, unburdened by logic, saw no boundary between the act and the outcome, no limit to the power of sympathy. To the magician, the world was alive with invisible threads, each one a pathway to control fate. Yet this was a false science, a cursed art, its promises as fleeting as a shadow in the storm. In the flickering firelight of Nemi's grove, the King of the Wood was both master and prisoner of this magic. His crown was a burden, his rituals a dance with death. The branch he plucked, the blood he spilled, the prayers he offered, all were acts of sympathetic magic, attempts to sway the gods and bind the land to his will. Yet the same magic that gave him power marked him for slaughter, his life a fleeting spark in the eternal cycle of the grove. As we stand at the edge of this dark sanctuary, we see the truth. The king was no mere priest but a magician, his throne an altar, his life a spell cast in blood. To understand his fate, we must journey deeper into the heart of magic, where the laws of similarity and contact weave a web of dread and wonder, binding man to the unseen forces of the world. The whisper of shadows, the dark art of homeopathic magic. In the shadowed grove of Nemi, where the lake gleamed like a cursed mirror under gnarled, ancient oaks, a priest-king known as the King of the Wood stalked the darkness, his sword a cold promise of death. His crown was won through murder, his life tethered to a sacred tree, and his fate sealed by the plucking of a branch, perhaps the Golden Bough, a talisman of doom whispered to hold the power of life and death. Two questions hung over this grim sanctuary like a shroud. Why must he kill to claim his throne? And why was this branch, steeped in blood and legend, the key to his cursed reign? To unravel these mysteries, we must plunge into a world where magic was a blade, sharp and unforgiving, wielded by those who believed they could bend reality with a single act. This was the realm of homeopathic magic, where like summoned like, and the King of the Wood was both sorcerer and sacrifice, his rituals a dance with the unseen forces that haunted the grove. In this primal world, magic was no mere trick but a law as unyielding as fate, a dark art rooted in the belief that what resembles another can become it. Homeopathic magic, or imitative magic, was a spell cast in mimicry, a sinister mirror where an act could summon its echo in the world. Picture a sorcerer in a firelit cave, his eyes glinting with malice as he molds a clay figure of his enemy, shaping it with care to mirror the man's form. He thrusts a thorn into its heart, muttering curses, certain that the wound will pierce the living man miles away. This was the law of similarity, a belief that like begets like, that the image could wield the power of the real. The act was not mere mimicry but a pact with the shadows, a cursed alchemy that promised to reshape fate. Across the ages, this dark art thrived. Among the North American Ojibwe, a vengeful soul would carve a wooden puppet of a foe, its features crude yet unmistakable. With a needle, he'd pierce its head or heart, or fire an arrow into its chest, believing each strike would sear the victim with pain in the corresponding part. To kill outright, he'd burn or bury the effigy, chanting words of power, certain the man would wither and die. In Mexico, a Kora Indian shaped a clay figure, muttering incantations as he drove thorns through its head or stomach, ensuring his enemy's agony. Yet the Kora could turn this magic to kinder ends, crafting wax or clay models of cattle or deer and placing them in mountain caves, believing the mountains, masters of all riches, would multiply their herds. Such offerings echoed those found in Diana's grove at Nemi, where figures of cows, deer, and pigs were dedicated, perhaps to summon abundance from the goddess's wild domain. In the jungles of Malaysia, a sorcerer's hatred took a darker form. He gathered pairings of nails, locks of hair, and spittle from his victim, crafting a wax figure from a deserted bee's comb. For 7 nights, he scorched it over a lamp, chanting, "It is not wax I am scorching, but the liver, heart, and spleen of so-and-so." On the 7th night, he burned the figure to ash, believing his enemy would perish. Another Malay charm was even more sinister. A wax corpse, the length of a footstep, was pierced in the eye to blind, the stomach to sicken, or the heart to kill. Shrouded like a dead man, it was buried in a path where the victim would tread, the sorcerer absolving himself by blaming the archangel Gabriel. In Sumatra, a wizard driven by hate or unrequited love hung a puppet on a lonely tree, driving a blade through its navel to raise a deadly ulcer, the sap of the tree believed to be the victim's life spirit. In the Torres Straits, sorcerers kept stone and wooden effigies, each a weapon of death. A stone figure meant swift doom, while a wooden one prolonged the victim's suffering. Poison was worked into the wood, named for the victim, who would waste away unless the spell was undone. A wax effigy pierced with a stingray's spine ensured the victim would be stung in turn, while one hung on a swaying bough brought sickness. In Borneo, a wooden image left to rot in the jungle spelled death for its human counterpart, while the Kenyans performed a ritual by a river, smearing a figure with fowl's blood and casting it into a reddened pool, praying for their enemy's head to be severed. In Japan, an Aino sorcerer buried a mugwort effigy upside down under a rotten tree, praying a demon would rot the victim's soul. A scorned wife might wrap her husband's headdress as a corpse and bury it, cursing him to decay. In China, bamboo and paper as substitutes of persons were sold cheaply, inscribed with a victim's name and horoscope. A nail in the effigy's eyes blinded, a pin in its stomach doubled the victim with pain, a stab to the heart killed. An ancient Chinese tale spoke of a treasurer's wooden effigy, bristling with nails, turning to flesh and crying out when struck, its discovery leading to the servant's execution. In Australia, the Aborigines of Victoria gathered around a crude ground drawing of their enemy, chanting curses until the victim, gripped by fear, wasted away. In Queensland, a wooden effigy buried or painted on a bull roarer doomed its target, while a Central Australian husband, grieving his eloped wife, drew her likeness on the ground, piercing a bark effigy of her spirit with miniature spears, believing it would dry her fat and end her life as a shooting star. In Scotland's misty highlands, a clay corpse cray was studded with pins and glass, placed in a stream to waste away its victim. Each pin was a curse, each thrust a wound, the crumbling clay a mirror of the victim's decay. Yet this magic could turn benevolent. Among the Eskimos, a barren woman slept with a doll under her pillow, its former charm to summon a son. In British Columbia, a Thompson Indian girl ran with stones in her bosom, praying for a delivery as easy as their fall. In Peru, women wrapped stones like babies to gain fertility, while in Africa, Basuto women tended clay dolls, beseeching gods for children. In Sumatra, a barren woman cradled a wooden child, believing it would spark life within her. This magic extended to healing. In ancient Greece, dropsy victims' children sat with feet in water to ward off the disease, while in India, a jaundice cure banished the yellow taint to birds and a red bull's vigor to the patient. In Germany, crossbills' red plumage drew fever from the sick, their crossed beaks a charm against fire and lightning. Yet the birds often died, burdened by the maladies they absorbed, their sacrifice a dark mirror of the king of the wood's own fate. Hunters and fishermen wielded this magic to secure food. In Central Australia, Arunta men performed Intikiyuma rites, mimicking widgety grubs emerging from a chrysalis to multiply them, or painting emu designs with blood to summon the birds. Blood was key, poured on sacred stones or sand hills to drive out animal spirits, a fertilizing force echoing the king of the wood's violent rituals. In British Columbia, a Nootka wizard floated a fish image to call real fish, while Torres Straits Islanders used dugong models to lure prey. In Nias, rubbing a pig's back with fallen leaves ensured more would fall into traps. Negative magic, or taboo, was the shadow of these charms. Hunters avoided acts that mirrored failure. A Galileese fisherman never cut his line, lest it break at sea. An Eskimo's boy shunned cat's cradle, fearing tangled harpoon lines. In war, wives observed strict rules, believing their actions could doom their husbands. A Dayak woman wore a sword to keep her warrior's mind sharp, while Malagasy women danced tirelessly to lend strength, their infidelity a death sentence for the absent. The King of the Wood stood at the heart of this shadowed world, his plucking of the Golden Bough perhaps a homeopathic act, mimicking the severing of life, his blood-soaked rain a spell to bind Diana's power. His grove was a crucible of magic, where every act carried the weight of doom, a dark mirror of a world where like summoned like, and the line between man and God was drawn in blood.